let me do that. As the chair of the Senate Education Committee to convene this informational hearing in concert with the Assembly Higher Education Committee. I am very grateful for everyone's engagement in today's topic, the state of public higher education coordination and collaboration. Each segment of California's higher education system plays a vital role in California's future. Each has a unique contribution. We must afford equal appreciation and consideration to each. Their mission statements express how best to meet the needs of the state and provide the framework within which the state funds and supports higher education programs and initiatives. More importantly, they share a deeper mission beyond the division between them to provide educational opportunity and success to all of California's people. We have 4 segments of post-secondary education in California, 3 public, 1 private. The community colleges are the gateway to equity, providing access to top-quality, lower division transfer and vocational education. The California State Universities offer quality undergraduate, graduate, and professional education and are regarded among the world's leading teaching universities. The University of California is the state's premier research university, and its research scholars and scientists play a critical role in the economic and social development of this great state. The private independent colleges and universities of the state are essential and valuable components of California's higher education system. Needless to say that our universities and colleges play a fundamental role in our state. The degree to which these institutions collaborate and coordinate their efforts directly influences their ability to address the evolving needs of our students and the workforce, ensuring that every aspect of the system is functioning effectively for the benefit of all Californians. The state has been without a higher education coordinating body for more than a decade, and a discussion of the current conditions of how different elements of the state's higher education system work together is worth having. I look forward to having a robust conversation on areas of success, challenges, and strategies for enhancing coordination and collaboration. Today we will have 3 panels. First, we'll have an overview discussion with stakeholder experts, including remarks from Dr. Sujin Jez with California Competes, a nonpartisan higher education policy and research organization, and Audrey Dow with the Campaign for College Opportunity, a higher education organization focused on student success issues. Next, we will hear from higher education system representatives about areas of success, challenges, and strategies for enhancing coordination. And last, we will hear from faculty from an implementation standpoint. Thank you all again for being here. We have a very full agenda, so I'll try to keep us on track and on time. That being said, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Assemblymember Fong, for his opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Senator Newman, for that warm introduction. And so excited to join each and every one of us here today to have a robust conversation. And I'd like to thank my fellow members from both houses, to our panelists, and the public for joining us at today's meeting. The Assembly Committee on Higher Education held a fantastic informational hearing in October at East Los Angeles Community College to talk about enrollment decline, learning loss, retention, recruitment strategies. A major takeaway from that hearing was the importance of collaboration. Campuses that were being innovative and really engaging their local communities were observing encouraging growth and stronger engagement from the community. When campuses and their local communities work together to find solutions, we see creative solutions to complex problems. And our hearing today also demonstrated what happens when higher educational institutions work collaboratively to find solutions in their regions, and has created additional opportunities for our students. As you mentioned earlier, the senators mentioned, the California Community Colleges, California State University, University of California, and our independent institutions each contribute meaningfully to our higher education ecosystem. These schools educate the next generation of leaders in our communities, helping to create engaged citizens while also addressing our future workforce needs. Our higher education system fundamentally addresses California-wide problems, and there needs to be a space for us to explore California-wide solutions. And in fostering that statewide collaboration and coordination, we can help to provide fertile ground for regional partnerships to continue to grow and prosper as a state. So thank you so much again to all our panelists for coming to testify today. Your respective insights will help us immensely in understanding the perspectives and challenges faced by our institutions today. Thank you so much again, Senator Newman.
Thank you, Chair Fong. We will be joined by some of our other colleagues as we move along. Let me first, before we start, let me welcome Assemblymember Sharon Quick-Silva. Assemblymember, any comments to start?
Well, since I'm the only other one here, of course. No, I'm really excited to be here. I'm back on the Higher Ed Committee. I was on a handful of years ago, and I'm happy to return. My district has the Cal State Fullerton, the great Titans, but I also have one of the oldest community colleges, Fullerton College in my district, and in the new part of my district, I have Cerritos College, which borders Cerritos and Norwalk. So we are definitely invested in education with thousands of individuals graduating from my District AD 67, and we know that there's pressing issues facing not only community colleges but additional higher ed, and as the chair noted, we have to figure out a way to collaborate as we move forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and that is an excellent segue to our first panel, the overview panel. Let me welcome Sue Ginges, PhD, who is the CEO of California Competes, which looks at higher education for a strong economy, and Audrey Dow, Senior Vice President of the Campaign for College Opportunity.
Thank you, and good morning. Good morning again, Chairs Newman and Fong and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me here today to participate in the hearing, and more importantly, for your leadership in higher education, which is a critical undertaking for our students and for the future of our state. My name is Audrey Dow, and I'm the Senior Vice President of the Campaign for College Opportunity. The campaign is a nonprofit, a coalition of education, civil rights, and business leaders really seeking to expand college access and student success here in California. I'm also an appointed commissioner of the California Student Aid Commission, where I assist in guiding California's student financial aid investments and priorities. We're here today to discuss higher education coordination in California. And since the defunding of the California Post-Secondary Education Commission in 2011, the state has not had a body with planning and coordination authority over our state's systems of higher education. The challenges that spring from a lack of coordination are many, and they're urgent. We have a broken transfer system, 3 separate financial aid systems that students who often straddle 2 or 3 institutions at a time must navigate, and often must navigate alone. We have an attainment goal, but no plan for reaching that goal. We see regional or piecemeal approaches to sharing resources when something much bigger and more powerful is needed. We lack standardized data collection and no entity with the authority to analyze that data, propose recommendations supported by that data, or to engage in any kind of long-range planning using the data to achieve our attainment goal. Unfortunately for our state, but especially for our students, we leave coordination across the 3 segments and CSAC to the individual relationships of the appointed leaders, the UC president, the CSU and California Community College chancellors, and the CSAC executive director. Those relationships are important, but there's nothing that compels them to work together. This is especially apparent in our budget process when institutions compete for limited resources and often see each other as competitors instead of allies. A coordinating body can be a neutral entity with only one goal in mind: serving students. California has a special prominence in national policy making. We've all heard the expression, as California goes, so goes the nation. But on this one issue, we see the reverse. California is the outlier and the anomaly to our own detriment. We see all other states having some version of a higher education coordinating body. They may have differing degrees of authority and autonomy, but every other state in the nation has made a conscious decision that, yes, it makes sense to devolve some degree of decision-making, analysis, and planning authority to an entity that has the expertise, the mission, and the staff to do so. We see coordinating bodies in red states and in blue states. In fact, there seems to be no relationship to the politics of a state and whether they have a commission. Rather, it's understood to be a necessary tool of governance and coordination, critical to ensuring that institutional interests do not drive the state's interests, that our higher education investments and policies are guided by evidence, and most importantly, made with students' needs in mind. We can look to other states. Oregon, for example, has a coordinating entity with formal authority to decide on and allocate institutional budget resources. That way, for example, there's appropriate vetting and analysis to evaluate the capital needs of individual campuses and determine financial aid needs. And they do this analysis through an equity lens, which is the cornerstone of Oregon's approach to higher education policy, and most importantly, funding. Colorado is another example that has a distinct division that coordinates and implements a statewide transfer policy, ensuring seamless transfer pathways and course mobility are prioritized. That we have lingered as a state so long without a body is even more egregious when you consider the complexity that distinguishes California from almost any other state. We have nearly 40 million people. The next closest state is Texas with 30 million. We are an incredibly diverse state with over half the state being Latinx, Asian, or African American. Not only that, but more than half of young Californians, our college-going population, are Latinx. We have pronounced income inequality with an income gap between high and low income families exceeding all but 3 other states. We have a housing crisis which both reflects and reinforces racial and ethnic inequities, which also reveal themselves in our segregated K-12 schools and districts. We have not one system of public four-year institutions like other states, but 2. We have the largest community college system in the world with 2.1 million students, with 64% classified as economically disadvantaged. So the question isn't why should we have a coordinating body? The question is why on earth wouldn't we? A good example of both the limits and potential of coordination can be found in the AB 928 committee, which the campaign was appointed to participate in. Signed in 2021, AB 928 articulates a vision for coordination that is time-limited, focused on the issue of transfer, and with clear parameters to its authority. The AB 928 committee has been successful in bringing stakeholders together to work on unified goals to improving transfer. As a public-facing venue, many conversations that would typically have occurred privately, behind closed doors, and in silos now occur publicly and in collaboration. However, the limits of the AB 928 committee is that its authority is limited to transfer, despite there being many areas, including BA and MA granting authority, or changes to undergraduate admissions requirements that require coordination. So actually, the lesson is coordination is possible, and parties can be incentivized to participate constructively. Imagine for a moment if some of the more controversial debates in California's higher education ecosystem weren't decided by one system's governing board, who have a vested interest in maintaining and strengthening the autonomy and prestige of their system, but instead delegated decision-making to a venue where policies are evaluated by whether they serve the residents of the state, whether they create barriers to access or completion, in essence, whether they are in the public's interest. Another area in desperate need of coordination is both goal setting and the harder part, goal attainment. The Newsom administration has articulated an ambitious attainment goal of 70%, meaning 70% of the state has a credential of value by 2030. But how do you actualize a goal that by its very nature requires coordination not just between the 3 systems, but with the K-12 system and the workforce as well? In what programs and policies do you invest to make progress against that goal? How do you measure progress? Using what metrics? We are so encouraged by the conversation today and by the recent Master Plan for Career Education, which acknowledges the need for a planning, oversight, and goal-setting venue to move our 70% attainment goal forward. We see this as a necessary first step, but we also hope that any new coordinating entity is embedded with the appropriate authority that would be required for institutional accountability, which includes the power to recommend institutional budgets, inform budget and policy priorities, and perhaps most vital of all, monitor compliance with and implementation of statute. Thank you again, members of the committee, for your time this morning. Happy to answer any questions.
And thank you both. Let me ask one question, and I'll open it up to my colleagues. You both noted the absence of a coordinating body and its implications. And so two-part question. In looking at reinstituting something like that, what would it look like? Would it just be CPAC sort of reinstalled, or would you describe it some other way? And in the interim, how can we accomplish those goals in the absence of a coordinating body? Ms. Dow.
I think what I'll add is I want to talk a little bit about what was good about CPEC. I echo Dr. Jez's comment that I don't think CPEC is the right model, but CPEC did provide a critical data research function for the state. It did collect data that was seamless across the three systems, and it also did really important projections for the state around capacity. They had a series called Ready or Not, Here They Come, really looking at what was coming, students coming from the K-12 system and predicting for the colleges and universities how they needed to prepare to best serve those students. That data function has not been picked up at all by any other entity, and each segment collects data in its own way. When we look at that data from the Campaign for College Opportunity, each institution disaggregates their data differently. Race and ethnicity categories are different, and it's really hard to get a sense of what is going on. I think the Cradle to Career data system is going to be a huge step in the right direction from there, but that is an essential part to any coordinating entity, is having the data capacity for us to understand who is in our system, who's coming into our system, who's leaving, where are they getting stuck. I will say that, to your question, Senator Newman, about what do we do if we don't have a coordinating entity, I don't know if I could in good conscience say that we should follow that approach, because as Sujin shared, we have continued to figure out piecemeal ways to do this intersegmental coordination that just doesn't work. We've had the leaders of the segments meet informally with the governor with no public agenda, no public accountability, and that really doesn't allow for all the issues that need to be vetted. I made a quick list of the issues that a coordinating entity need to talk about. It's goals, transfer, financial aid, admissions, data collection, the sharing of best practices, shared resources. When we talk about housing, we actually have some campuses that have housing that could be shared with a neighboring campus. We are leaving those opportunities to chance, that leaders are talking to one another, but there's no formal way to really look at our inventory and coordinate around that. Budget, evaluation, capacity, and workforce. Just in the last 2 or 3 years, on the issue of admissions, we've seen the CSU try to add an additional requirement to A to G, looking at an additional quantitative reasoning courses, and right now the UC is considering adding another layer, or taking away a course that would be counted under the math requirement with no consultation with the California Department of Education. That is where the value of a coordinating entity would come in. If we have higher education setting admissions requirements, which they do, but without talking to K-12, the K-12 system, we are essentially saying that K-12 may not be ready to produce students and meet those new admissions requirements, and we're siphoning off access if those conversations are not happening, if those conversations about how long will it take you, K-12, to be able to offer these courses in a way that's equitable, we're not having those conversations. So I don't know that at this point, with the volume, I think, of issues that require intersegmental coordination, I don't think that I could recommend another way to really get around it, because I think we've been trying to do that, and we keep coming back to this same place of when are we going to have, I think, the political will to institutionalize a coordinating body.
Your point is well taken. Colleagues, questions, comments? Sir.
Thank you so much, Chair Newman, and thank you so much for the great presentation here today. And I know you mentioned Colorado and Oregon and some of the examples here. Can you give us other examples of what other states have done to really support collaboration and collaborative work between the different segments and how we can really continue to encourage that work here in California?
There are a lot of other states that are doing coordination work, and I think where we saw a proliferation of states has been around attainment goals. So we've seen a number of states through their coordinating body have an attainment goal that was set by the legislature and the governor, and these entities, the coordinating commissions, really setting out what the plan is. What are the metrics by which we're going to measure ourselves, and what are the key drivers of that? So I would really say that a lot of the commissions operate as setting a strategic plan for higher education to meet a goal and then implementing that. A number of states, as I shared, or Oregon and Colorado included, are taking the systems within their state and recommending budget. A lot of the systems are doing transfer work. A lot of the systems are also thinking through, or a lot of the coordinating bodies are thinking through financial aid from start to finish, regardless of what segment the students are in. So those are just a few of the ways that we're seeing.
Assemblymember Quicksilver.
Thank you for your testimony. I am taking a lot in here, but I'm doing the math on CPEC was dissolved in 2011, so about 13 years ago. And over those years, like I said, I was on higher ed. I, my fact, am an educator by profession, 20 years in the classroom, elementary classroom. And some of these conversations I've heard in roundtables in our district on higher ed. I've heard individually from going to meetings with higher ed, whether it's community college, higher ed. And yet I'm astounded that we're not making progress. You mentioned on the transfers. I understood that we had about close to 30 transfer programs where if a student knew what they wanted to do, just say at a CSU, and they started community college, if they had chosen that transfer program, immediately they could get through in 4 years. And yet many students don't know this because they're not getting to campuses talking face-to-face with the counselor, so they may spend a year on a community college before they even know about these programs. So you talked about broken financial systems and so forth, and I agree that coordination is imperative, but without us bringing back a formal body, which I don't think is going to be likely in the climate we are now, how do we insist that there is coordination without having a mandate to do that? I see a lot of people in the audience, and because I've seen silos forever in education, and about every 10 years there's another big mandate. Matter of fact, right now in elementary, I know I spoke to the chair, it's now a new way to teach reading, and it's going to be, everybody's going to learn to read by doing science of reading. The truth is that's not the truth. The truth is that we have multiple ways to get there, and unless we figure this out, we're going to have the same situation 5 or 10 years from now where people keep asking for more funding, and we have to embrace who we have in front of us, the students that are a changing body, changing demographic, and I'm wanting to hear more, but I am raising my eyebrows, I guess, if you would say, on some of the information I'm hearing, because I heard it 10 years ago, 20 years ago.
The only thing I'll add to that, Assembly Member, is, the example I gave in my testimony about the AB 928 committee, which really legislated that the parties come together to figure out and strengthen transfer via the associate degree for transfer, which I think is what you were discussing. I don't think that's the way we want to approach coordination, that you want to legislate essentially every opportunity that requires of a way that a conversation happened in the public with clear goals, was facilitated, to have regular convenings to meet a charge. And that is what we're lacking. We don't have kind of a neutral place where all of the players are coming together in a legislated way, required to report out so that there's accountability and do the job that they're supposed to do, again, across the segments. When it does happen, it is organic. And there's a lot of stuff that happens organically, and that's wonderful. But as a state, I think that the stakes are too high for us to leave some of this coordination to chance, to the existing relationships of higher education leaders because they know each other and want to work together. If there are institutional leaders that don't like each other, they could decide, I'm not going to work with that person. And where does that leave us? That's not a good place to be. And so I do think there needs to be the formality of a commission, of a coordinating entity to coordinate.
So I do appreciate that. I mean, we've seen some of that friction around conversations around, baccalaureate programs between community colleges and the CSU, and it's sort of largely based on goodwill, right? There's no real leverage to force either of those entities to work closely together. To Assemblymember Quicksilver's point, I mean, not a small thing to re-implement coordinating bodies. So my last question for you is getting from here to there, right? So I accept that both of you think that this is needed. What guidance would you give us on sort of working deliberately toward creating and implementing a new coordinating body?
I think there are a couple of things. I think first it's really assessing, what are the priorities in terms of what California should be coordinating? What are the areas in, determining capacity, in access, in completion, in financial aid, right? What are those big buckets? I think it is doing that landscape analysis, a lot of which California Competes has done, to say, what are some of the best practices that can work for California that other states have tried? I know there were, several years ago, the Campaign for College Opportunity actually brought the leaders from Oregon to California to talk to our legislative bodies about how they approached establishing and strengthening their coordinating entity. So I think it is talking with those stakeholders to figure out how might we set this up. The California legislature has had no shortage of tried policy making, right, to establish a coordinating entity. I think looking at those conversations, I think the hearing today is a great first step, but then I think it is putting out a proposal based on that feedback. I think the legislature has a tremendous amount of power. Sometimes the question is, well, what do we do about UC, right, as an autonomous entity? You do have significant power with your budgetary authority that can essentially wrangle the three systems to work there. You have significant leverage, I think, to require that and a call to the state to meet those needs.
I hear what you're saying, but I am just a little, with all due respect, skeptical about just relying on getting the right people involved when there seems to be a structural issue, that we've seen here in California, given, the constitutionally autonomous University of California and the segments, I'm not aware of anything in terms of that fundamental dynamic changing between when CPEC was disbanded in 2012 or 2011 and now. And so, I would just hope that this discussion and ongoing discussions would try to address structural solutions rather than just relying on, getting the right leadership.
Absolutely. I think that the incentives and the authority piece that I hinted on earlier are also key parts of this too.
Yeah, I would echo the authority. I think CPEC, while it did, as I shared earlier, have a great data function, what it completely lacked and what I think made it ineffective was its lack of authority. Authority for, I think as you're thinking about a new entity, we should be thinking about budgetary authority, such that the entity can make a recommendation to the legislature for a budget for the three segments, not just one segment. It should be thinking about approval around admissions, such that if an institution wants to make admissions changes, how does that entity quote unquote approve those things? I think we also degree offerings. We talked about that a little bit right now, right? Who offers degrees, what degrees, how are we meeting demand and having that entity. Without those levers of authority, there's no incentive for the institutions to participate in the coordinating entity at all. There just really isn't. And then it can become a platform for just rhetoric and fun, maybe conversation, but no real work.
I appreciate all of your comments. Anything else? Okay, as we close it. So I do think, first, thank you, Dr. Dow, Dr. Jez, Ms. Dow. You have framed well the rest of our discussion. It probably went on longer than we had assumed, but I think that's a good thing. So thank you very much for your testimony, and it is very relevant to the rest of the hearing. Let me turn it over now to my colleague, Assemblymember Fong.
Thank you so much, Senator Newman.